You're much better off having somebody that shows up for 3 hours totally focused than somebody that works 12 hours limping.
Welcome to The Visionary Entrepreneur. My name is Dane Dunlap.
And I'm Nicholas Genovese.
This is a podcast where we interview entrepreneurs about their story and visions for the future. We're here to create a space to network and to learn from each other's experiences. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode. Today we interview Sean Mcarthy, who is one of the world's best life and health coaches. He's helped tons of athletes and executives perform at their highest level. He actually got started when his wife, Brenda Schultz, was a top 10 in the world tennis player, injured her back, and he helped her make a comeback. And later in her career, she hit the fastest women's tennis serve of all time. So over his career, he's helped a lot of business executives and CEOs actually reduce their stress and optimize themselves so that they can perform at the highest level. So today we talked to him about just that, which is how can you, whether it's nutritionally or mind techniques or spiritually, emotionally, how can you take care of your health so that you can optimize your brain and work at the highest level. So I hope you guys enjoy.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Sean, for being on our podcast. You have been super influential for us because you were key to us starting this podcast and us going into the right direction. So thank you for taking the time being on the show.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Yeah, again, same for me. Thank you. I mean, thanks for having the time with us on your farm. That was very helpful. And now I kind of think of things a little differently. And I know, you know, through your time, you helped your wife, Brenda, who used to be top 10 in the world in tennis. And that's kind of how we were connected. And you helped her through injury and she made an amazing comeback. And a lot of what you learned and what you taught was through health and nutrition. And you've worked with a lot of athletes over the years and high performers, but kind of wanted to shift that towards, in a business sense. Have you noticed, I know you've worked with executives and those types of people as well, how can you take care of your health and your nutrition in order to kind of succeed better in business or focus more in that sense?
Well, I think we're all human beings. So at the end of the day, whatever we can do to perform better allows us to achieve whatever we want to achieve at a higher level. If you want to be a better parent, you want to be a better student, you want to be a better educator, you want to be a better leader or entrepreneur, which, you know, your thing's based on entrepreneurship. I don't really believe you can be an entrepreneur unless you treat yourself like a Formula One team. You know, a Formula One team would never think about putting cheap fuel in their body. But why does the average entrepreneur drink cheap coffee, eat cheap carbohydrates, stay up all night, screw up their circadian rhythm? And they do all these things because we're taught that we have to break ourselves down to perform at a high level. So I think health and wellness really, or being whole and complete, is about understanding in totality what makes you tick and not just looking from an individual perspective. Because I think even athletes who are phenomenal at taking care of themselves and performing and training and nurturing themselves while they train, if you look at the average health of an athlete, a former professional athlete in their 50s, it's not really great. So they say that the average business person kind of hits their stride in their 40s. So if that's the case, they probably have a 20 to 25 year window based on what people want to do before they retire that they can perform. So a lot of what happens between 18 when you go into university or college and say your 40s when you start to perform and hit your stride in business, well, if you don't take care of yourself for those 20 years, you're going to have a lot of risk that you've done. You know, you might have been going out, having fun, partying, working hard, traveling, doing whatever it takes, having a lot of stress trying to finance things or climb through the corporate ladder, or maybe you're an M&A attorney and you want to become partner. You're going to work 100 hours a week. Well, we're not designed to do that. So if you're not doing things to mitigate that risk and take care of yourself, you're really going in reverse. And I call it blind spots. You have blind spots that are just going to smack you in the face. It could be cancer. It could be a divorce. It could be a child that you didn't pay enough attention to. It just becomes a landmine, and it's very hard then to hit your stride in your 40s, 50s with those types of disastrous things happening. So I believe everybody has to take care of themselves. It's not just an athlete or an executive. Every human being has to have a paramount of wellness is part of their existence. I always coined the phrase, that wellness is the ultimate leadership tool. Because think of Tom Brady. He's going to go play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year. Let's just say they make it to the playoffs. Would he ever go into the playoffs with a completely blown out knee? No, because he wouldn't be able to perform. He would be at risk to injuring himself permanently for the rest of his life. But his team would not be at their best. They'd be better off with the second string guy who's not Tom Brady healthy than Tom Brady. But what happens is business people all the time, and even students in business school, do things to stay up all night and push the envelope, and they're not going to take care of themselves, but they don't think that they're not performing at their ultimate level. So they're bringing a substandard level of themselves to product development, to whatever department they're running, or if they're an entrepreneur, they're wearing all the hats. So I think it's funny that athletes would never think of doing certain things, but business people, it's a difference in wellness, corporate wellness, between presenteeism and absenteeism. Absenteeism means you're not at work. Presenteeism means there's something wrong with you mentally, physically, emotionally, that you're not at your ultimate level, and you should probably be taking time off to have it dealt with, but you want to go to work and don't want to be seen as that, you're a hypochondriac or something that can't perform your job because of some physical or mental issue. So you're going to go to work and you're delivering a diluted version of yourself, which I think is actually a crime in the workplace. I think you're much better off having somebody that shows up for 3 hours totally focused than somebody that works 12 hours limping.
Yeah, I think that's a big misconception, is that you need to just work harder and more hours, and that's better than being more productive and a better version of yourself. And I think that people miss the disconnect between, I think a lot of athletes do take care of their health, maybe not as much as they should, of course, but I think it's totally missed out in the business world. But could you be more specific on how a business person might go about taking care of their wellness?
The thing that I find is very interesting, I'm not saying all, because there is a change and there's been a shift over the last 10 years since I was in that business. People go and they just start exercising. People never get an assessment done to see where they actually are. So for me, the biggest thing that's important is taking the time to get yourself analyzed, to see where the mishaps and breakdowns in your body are. Because a lot of people are like, well, I used to be a runner. They haven't run in 15 years. They go running. Well, they're off balance. Maybe they put on weight. Something's happened. They get injured. Then they get depressed. So for me, I think the most important thing is to find a high quality person that can assess where you are and how functional you are through the whole kinetic chain, from flexibility, mobility, connectivity, the small and large muscles. I think you really have to see how the fluid movement of the body works so you don't get injured. I think the other thing is that you also have to take a look at who influences a lot of the things in healthcare. So for me, when I was in disease management and corporate wellness, the programs that were being delivered, if I tried to actually deliver those to a professional athlete, I'd be fired in a day. So the thing is like there's so many groups influencing healthcare and wellness that I'm a firm believer you've got to go find the people that are not being paid by an insurance company, because it means their thoughts and views are independent. Generally, not always. The more expensive somebody is, the better they are. But you always get testimonials and find people and like rigorously interview the people that have helped these people. Don't just say, well, that person worked for me, because their situation may have been totally different from yours. So I think the assessment is the most critical thing to see where you are, so somebody can develop a plan for you, both nutritionally, both from a performance perspective, because your mind and your body are connected. And if you don't have somebody that knows how to deal with those things simultaneously, I think you're shortchanging yourself. Because if you get too many chefs in the kitchen, you know what I mean? Everybody has an opinion. I'm a firm believer if you can find somebody that's multidisciplinary, like if you can find a Chinese doctor that actually does physical training as well, or a chiropractor, somebody that has multiple levels of influences. So then I think you have such a better way of functioning, because they understand the multidisciplinary dynamics of how a human functions. Whereas you just go get a personal trainer, they may be able to make you sweat a lot, or you might be able to go to a yoga class and they may be able to make you feel like you've become flexible, but they may not be totally aware of everything that you need. So I think the more certifications, disciplines, focuses that somebody has, the better.
Yeah, I think one of the huge things for us is that business people look at coffee and sugar as a way to get them through the day, to get them through the meeting, and to make them productive again. And because of the higher dopamine, you feel good for a couple hours, but in reality, you're just poisoning your body slowly. And something that was really powerful for the two of us is how can you make coffee work for you instead of against you? Is like, what are the
Well,
impacts on bad coffee, and how can you shift that into a powerful
well,
experience?
I don't know if you guys know this story, but it was a few years back. I was involved in a project where we brought all the coffee growers of America from Colombia all the way up to the Mexican border to Tennessee for a meeting because they had the coffee rust problem and it was killing the coffee plants. And they didn't have a real remedy. They were using things like copper and other things, toxic things that weren't really working. And part of the problem was is it was soil derived and it wasn't only from the plant. And so at that time, one of the solutions from a major American university was to rip out all the plants and make them genetically modified. Well, they had had this problem at other places in the world and other continents, and that's what they did. A lot of their remedy was ripping out the plants and making them genetically modified. So one, it's understanding the quality of the coffee. And by that, what I mean is how integral and kind of boutique is the growing platform. Because what's going to happen is if it's a traditionally commercialized way of growing coffee, Dave Asprey made this popular with bulletproof coffee when he took the way that the Tibetans used green tea and yak milk and mineral salts is their elixir kind of for the day that they mainly used and didn't eat so much and allowed them to have optimal brain power and function. But cheap coffee has neurotoxins, it has molds, it has chemicals in it, and it's highly acidic. That's not the way coffee was supposed to be. And that highly industrialized coffee, it leaches the minerals out of your body, it dehydrates you, it causes you to have high levels of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So there's a your good hormones, your serotonin and things of that nature. When cortisol goes up and your melatonin, the other ones go down. So when you drink 1 cup of cheap coffee, it creates a day's worth of cortisol. Well, most people, especially because of sleep cycles being so out of whack now, are at a cortisol overload. So drinking coffee just puts them into warp speed and causes adrenal fatigue. And then that can lead to a lot of things. So I think, Dave Asprey started a big push with this. I think Ori Hofmeckler, that started the Warrior Diet years and years ago, talked about doing traditionally slow brewed coffee. He talked about using it with grass fed organic raw cream if you could, and to drink it just prior to where you worked out, where it threw off excessive amounts of growth hormone, and then you could flush the cortisol out of your system while working out. So in his research, he's a super high performer, it was better to drink it before you worked out, but to just take slow brewed coffee with raw cream, and that was it. Not any sugar, nothing in it. I think when Dave got involved, he had a mold problem and he was crippled by mold. So he went and analyzed all the foods that had high levels of mold. And what he found was is that coffee was one of the big culprits of mold. So the average person that's going to the local fast food restaurant or donut shop or bagel joint and getting cheap coffee is really detrimenting themselves. So I think what Dave did is he came up with a model of putting fats that actually enhance brain function and acted like a carbohydrate. So a medium chain fatty acid that is in something like coconut oil, it burns slowly like a carbohydrate. So you're not having a carbohydrate in your body, but you feel like you have a carbohydrate in your body, the way it burns, and it's enhancing your brain function. It's because your brain is predominantly water and fat. So if you don't have the proper fats, the average human being has a 20-to-1 bad to good fat ratio. And most of the people look at omega-3s as a way to bring back the good fats, but they're missing out on some other fats, which are critical, which are medium chain fatty acids, which is found in coconut oil. So when you take an alkaline coffee free of mold and all the toxins, it's grown at high elevations at a boutique coffee plantation, you're actually getting something that's alkaline, which has a high pH, just like all the high pH water, it's alkalized, and it's actually not going to have those detrimental aspects at the level of creating cortisol, rising the negative hormone levels or the bad hormones, and leaching the minerals from your body. And so it ends up being something that's highly antioxidant rich. And when you're mixing it with these proper fats, it's enhancing your brain function. I was at a friend of mine's health shop yesterday, and there's an older gentleman, 76 years old. He comes in there twice a day, early in the morning, mid-morning, has 2 coffees. And he said, I swear that my brain function is better. And he was a former military guy, international businessman, and politician. So there's somebody that's 76 that's not doing a lot in their life other than coming to my friend's health shop for his version of Bulletproof. And I think then you can add some other things in it to get creative that are going to enhance the antioxidant level and enhance the anti-inflammatory aspects of it, that can really enhance coffee and actually make that thing that people can't live with in the morning something that actually is a performance tool, instead of something that for most people is just a death bomb.
Yeah. Well, Sean, I have to be honest with you. When we were at your farm and you were making us the coffee, and we'll try to provide that recipe of the Supercoffee, and it helped me out a bunch. But I have to be honest, when I got back, I kind of started falling into my bad habits of buying cheaper coffee for a few weeks, and I actually noticed a huge difference of just feeling stressed out, feeling anxious. And it's interesting because before I just would never have noticed that without actually having something that's beneficial. So I definitely can attest to that. It helped me out.
Well, now you have to come back up to the farm because we have the cows now, so you can just get the milk straight from the cow and put it
the raw milk.
So you're going to be better off.
I definitely miss the raw milk in my coffee. That was a game changer.
Do you have any other hacks or tips to improve brain power, diets that you can substitute?
There's a couple things. I think the average person, especially business people, are out and entertaining, they're doing a lot. So I think a lot of people drink a lot. So I'm a firm believer, if you understand how to start take care of your liver health, that your liver health, the reason that most people feel really bad when they drink is because of liver toxicity. So, you might want to find a homeopathic physician. That would be my suggestion. They don't charge tons of money. You can probably find a good one and get a consult for about $150. I can't say, hey, take this remedy or whatever, but the one that they typically suggest, and I would call one, is called Nux Vomica. It costs about $7, and you can buy it and take it after you've indulged too much, or for some people before, and it will help with the liver toxicity, even to the point where it's one of the remedies that's used for food poisoning. I think taking that, or something like L-glutamine, you take that before you go to bed, which helps detoxify your liver. Waking up the next day and having a celery juice right away, a big tall glass of celery juice, pure celery juice, will put back the electrolytes, high doses of methylated vitamin C. The medical medium, Anthony William, talks about this. But after that, juice a whole lemon or 2 into purified water about 30 minutes later and drink it. And it's because it nurtures your liver. It's the greatest hangover cure in the world. Well, it's one of the reasons why tomato juice is a big thing for people drink the cheap V8, but real tomato juice with some ginger and lemon and cilantro after a night of drinking too much. And it's just a reality, because when somebody's trying to raise money, they're going on a road show, trying to promote a company that they've just done a reverse merger or something like that, and they're going around from town to town, they're going to end up socializing and drinking and entertaining. And I think you have to be intelligent enough to look at what an athlete does to mitigate that. I mean, I've literally had athletes call me up and say, you have to meet me at XYZ airport. I'm so hungover. Give me one of your remedies so I can play today. And they work. there's things out there that people do to make themselves perform better. But most people are going to drink cheap coffee after with a hangover, and then they complicate the problem. So, the other thing, there's that new book by the guy Nestor. It's about breathing. It's like an ancient something with a scientific approach. His last name's Nestor, and he's an investigative reporter that mainly does things for like Outside Magazine and National Geographic. Well, he had some issues with breath work or with breathing, so somebody suggested a breath work class about 10 years ago. Well, he noticed such a profound change that he actually went to places like Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania and Stanford and looked into research that showed how powerful breath work is. And they actually had medical scientific data for over 100 years. I think he got back as far as 150 years ago when somebody was investigating the American Indians and how their facial structure and teeth were different than the Europeans. And they found out that a lot of it was diet, but predominantly something like 60% of it was mainly the way they would breathe. So nose breathing is really powerful, and it impacts every aspect of your life, including your bone density. It alkalizes your system. It creates more nitrous oxide than about anything that you can. You can drink all the beet juice, eat arugula and kale till you're blue in the face, and you can't create as much nitrous oxide as you do from nose breathing. Well, what's that going to do? It's going to heighten your awareness. It's going to expand and dilate your capillaries, veins, and arteries. It's going to help you sleep better. You're 50% less dehydrated when you're nose breathing predominantly. They say you have up to 90% more nutritional absorption. I've been talking about nose breathing for 20 years, and Brenda, actually my wife, taped some guy's mouth today when he was on a tennis court. I said, look, well, I have to grunt. I have to do this. I'm like, well, not if you're training with me. No. Can you get over there? So I think what my point is that what business people forget sometimes is business people sometimes think the most expensive thing is the best, or they're frugal. So they go on two ends of the spectrum. I'm going to go get the best accounting firm or whatever, or I'm going to get the cheapest one, right? And from a performance perspective, a lot of the things that have been around for years and years and centuries are the best things. So breath work, hydration. I think hydration is critical.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing that there's so many things out there to better yourself at, like breath work, like hydration, the hangover cures. There's so many things out there that are so cheap and easy, but people really do not take advantage of them. People would much rather work themselves to a pulp because it satisfies something in them rather than just doing something that's easy.
You also have to look at one other thing. I think you need to be very upfront with everybody in the process that I make a commitment as part of my business practices to take care of myself and be a whole being, so that they know if you're at yoga, it's because it makes you a better business person. They know if you're going on a bike ride or going free diving or going paddle boarding or getting acupuncture or chiropractic, that it's actually preventative and performance-based practices as opposed to you're some form of hypochondriac that can't manage back pain.
Yeah, that's literally me, and I think that's a big misconception. It's something that I think you helped me a lot with, and I wanted to shift gears a little bit. Something that's really popular nowadays, people are talking a lot about intermittent fasting, and I know that this is something that you preach and you believe in. So how can intermittent fasting help not only brain function but performance, whether it's business or even athletically or your body?
Well, I think first of all, the big thing is that we're all taught, to finish your plate, right? Don't waste your food.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is that we get trained at a young age to eat a lot. And most of the time now in a dual income family household, we don't always have the option for the quality of food we once had. So that being said, there's so many chemical and electrobiological, electropsychological processes that are going on because of the food, that your body becomes overactive because it's constantly in the digestive process, or it's mitigating the processes in the body because they're thrown off out of balance. They're no longer like symmetrical and harmonious because they're breaking down genetically modified foods, high levels of toxins, excessive amounts of sugars. You talked about sugars. So I'll kind of throw sugars into the intermittent fasting mix. So our digestive tract needs a break. A lot of studies are coming out now that there's 100,000 times the cellular regeneration in the digestive tract that there is anywhere else in the body. Well, there's also, Nick talked about coffee, about, serotonin and dopamine and things of that nature. Well, there's more of that they're finding now that's being produced in the gut than elsewhere. There's 6 signals they say that can go from the gut to the brain, and 1 can go from the brain down. So the intricacies of the digestive tract and the digestive neurosystem and the vagal nervous system, they're learning more and more about, and they're finding how intricate it is. So in today's modern world, the average person is spending, depending on the meal, say you have a meat lover's pizza, that may take you upwards of 12 hours to break down because of the combination of foods. That's taxing on your digestive tract. Now, if you have a meat lover's pizza for lunch, and then you go home and you have some chicken fingers and you want to be healthy and have a salad and have some fruit, well, now you've pushed out that digestive process window even longer. Well, think about it. How can you fix that? You have to rest. It's just like you guys were athletes. You couldn't train all the time. You need to give your digestive tract a break. So fasting has been around forever. It's talked about in the Bible countless times. It's both a spiritual practice and it's a health-related practice, but it's every bit as much of a performance tool. There's a guy, Dr. Goop, that's a chiropractor that was part of studies of what fasting did. And so there were a variety of fastings that involved different, supplements and botanicals and orthomolecular things. They got shut down with the research because there was not one single health issue that they did not have a benefit from fasting. Don Tolman did a study with John Hopkins where he did something that I call a fear fast, that I do a tweak of his fast. And 100% of type 1 and type 2 diabetics after 90 days, most after 30 days, were no longer diabetics from a first form of fasting. So intermittent fasting is popular, but there's water fasting, there's certain type of food category fastings, there's rotational fastings. But really the bottom line is, in a nutshell, if you give your body a break, it can heal and it becomes more efficient. But guess what? A lot of the guys out in Silicon Valley are doing intermittent fasting 2 to 3 days a week. And they're actually looking deep. They're very into biohacking out in Silicon Valley. And they're finding that 2 or 3 days a week of just having a short eating window of like 4 to 6 hours, 2 days a week, excuse me, they're allowed, every function of the body improves.
Can I ask you, does intermittent fasting make you lose weight? Because that's something that I feel a lot of people have hesitation about trying it. I know I had hesitations about that. Obviously could help with brain function, but if people feel like their physical appearance is going to be, lesser because of it, then they might not try it.
Well, but you're a rarity. I mean, you're a former college athlete that's really fit and takes care of himself. So you actually were a skinny tennis player that now wants to be a little jacked. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think the thing is but what intermittent fasting does, and it's a great book if you ever read it, called The Warrior Diet by Ori Hofmeckler. And he did a historical dive through art at looking at the bodies of people over time, seeing when they looked the fittest, and he saw how they ate. What he finds is when you fast, what you need will happen. Okay, so maybe you do need to put on a little bit of weight. So weight will come, because when you're throwing off growth hormone through fasting, and there's, your body goes through autophagy after a certain point of fasting, and it has a limited amount of it in intermittent fasting, where it's gobbling up the cells and cleaning the cells and washing the cells. Your body functions better. So that means every organ and function in the body, including your hormonal exchange, is going to be better. So for me, right now, I do need to do a little bit more fasting and lose a little bit of weight. So it's going to benefit me. But you might need to put on weight and actually going to a 4-hour window or 1 meal a day with a recovery meal after you work out. That's it. you might put on 15 pounds from fasting. And people say, well, how is that possible? Well, your body regulates itself when it heals. This year I started the year doing a 15-day water fast. The first 10 days I put on weight. The last few days I lost 18 pounds. My body was doing what it needed. So I think a lot of times people freak out during fasting. And if you really, there's a lot of great resorts around the world that have focused fasting where you can go and they monitor you and they do health workups and lab work and they do everything before and after. What they find a lot of times with fasting is your cholesterol goes up the first 10 days, your blood pressure goes up, your weight could go up, your irritability, because your body's recalibrating and it's healing. So it's kicking off all these things and flushing it through the body. So if you are going to fast, it's something that you generally have to be committed to be able to allow your body to start to recalibrate itself and harmonize itself so that it can find what you need.
I think a really big part about fasting is that people are scared about it because there's a huge part which is irritability. When I look at my father, for example, he is very hesitant of fasting because he feels like he needs the food and he's scared to try that.
But Nick,
what is a tool of how to start the experience of fasting?
For me, I'm a firm believer. I talked about a couple things. I talked about breath work, I talked about sound therapy, and I talked about proper hydration. If you go every time you feel a dip, if you do some powerful breath work, it will harmonize your system because, John Douillard is a great Ayurvedic guy. He's a chiropractor. He's a maxi marathoner. He worked with a lot of, he was one of the guys that worked with John McEnroe during his burnout. And so, because all his screaming and yelling and partying had fried his nervous system. So, he taught him a lot of things from that perspective. So I think, and John only eats once a day, really. He might eat a little bit more as kids. I think his kids have gotten a little older. When I had him on my podcast, he eats one big meal and goes and runs a 50-mile race in the mountains the next day. And most people think that's crazy. So I think the thing is when you do the breath work, it recenters you, it calms down your nervous system, and you can get through a fast a lot easier so everybody has their different reasons why they fast and the different things that pull them through. But I will tell you, proper hydration and breath work will pull you through the toughest type of fast. And you also have to be intelligent. A lot of people, we're a gung-ho society. People want to jump in right away and say, oh, I'm going to water fast for 40 days. I think you have to skip a meal, skip a food category. You know what I mean? Don't eat carbs. Don't eat protein. Don't eat fats. Okay, that's a type of fast. Don't eat breakfast. Skip lunch. Skip dinner. Only eat for 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day. Play around with it. I believe in engineered fasting. The best way is to engineer it to your schedule, your lifestyle, your likes and dislikes, because there's plenty of people that don't eat ultimately healthy, but they fast and they have incredible results because they're limiting their window of eating so their body can process carbohydrates, sugars, and everything. And you talked about, cheap sugars, that people thrive on that. One of the best ways to get through that is through fasting. Whether you're hypoglycemic or you're borderline diabetic, fasting has a lot of science behind it. And, you can go and find some incredible things. Like I talked about Don Tolman. I talked about Dr. Goop. Those are people that have been doing fasting for a long time. John Douillard is phenomenal with fasting. David Avocado Wolf talks about, more of like the vegan juice type of fasting situations. So, there's a lot of good information out there, whether you're a carnivore meat eater, you're paleo, vegan, whatever you are, you can find a fast that works for you. I'm a firm believer in seasonal eating. So I think rotational fasting through the seasons is great. You guys are in South Florida. I mean, you're not, a ketogenic diet in my mind is the last thing you want to do. Heavy cream and stuff like that and tons of meat and, you know what I mean? And being a ketogenic vegan is about as much fun as putting, I don't know what in my fingertip. You know what I mean?
We
So,
we were
but
just reading a bunch of Tim Ferriss stuff, and Tim is obviously a big keto guy. That's kind of
but it
hilarious.
works for some people. But the thing is what most people don't understand is that, you know, viruses and all these creepy crawly things that come out when you're really stressed out go dormant when you're in a ketogenic state. I don't want to get into too many of my skill sets, Nick, because you don't want me to freak out the listeners. But
Hmm?
you know, I see a lot of things that the average person doesn't. So I mean, there's a lot of things that happen with ketogenic that people aren't aware of. And so, you know, different people need different things. We're all individuals. So you have to find what works for you, where you live, where you're from, and what your clinical needs are based on where you are all important when looking at fasting.
John, I wanted to ask you kind of to wrap up our health discussion. There's so many things that you can do for your well-being, but yet I don't know what percentage of the population, definitely the majority, are not doing any of these things. So why do you think that people are doing that, and what's the limit on, you know, an investment banker who's not taking care of their health? Where is their limit?
All right, so let me give you a story, and I can't tell you the person's name or the company, but I once had a call because I helped the chief people officer from a company that had about 15,000 officers or 15,000 employees. He was supposed to have hip and knee replacement surgery, so two hips and one knee. I was at a program with him, and I said, "Hey, meet me at the gym. I'll teach you some things, and then I'll burn it on a CD and send it to you." So that tells you how long ago it was. It was before my son Brendan was born, who's 11, that interrupted things earlier. So um, I sent it to him, and I said, "Just do what you can do with this every day." And it was what you guys know as my qigong and mobility warm up, but a more comprehensive one. You know, he sent me something. This was in the fall. He sent me something right around Christmas, and he said, "I can squat down and get my butt to my knees pain free. I can go back and coach my grandkids' athletics teams," because he loved coaching youth sports. So he referred me to the CEO of his company who was having knee replacement surgery. And the guy was like, "Well, I donated the orthopedic wing at the blah, blah, blah university hospital, you know, all this stuff." I go, "That's great. Did they tell you about this?" "No." I said, "Okay, well, I'd be a little weary. Did they tell you about this?" "No, no." I used the whole Tom Brady example. That's where I came up with that one. Like, Tom Brady would never go lead the Patriots in the Super Bowl with his knee blown out completely. What you're going to do is you're not going to pay attention to things, and you're going to think that you can come back and run that company because your physician convinced you that a knee replacement was a simple thing that was just merely your high school football days, which happened 20 something years ago or 40 something years ago in this guy's situation. Guess what? He never came back to work again because of complications. His brother had to run the company, who was not as capable of a business person. The company is struggling in a very competitive market. They lost multiple board of directors. They lost their lead business consultants that they could point fingers. They lost key team members. I mean, there's a guy that, fourth generation business guy, that was a little pompous and thought his checkbook could take care of everything. But guess what? You got to put the work in for your health and well-being. It takes effort, it takes discipline, and it takes focus, but it doesn't have to be crazy. I mean, if you do 5 minutes of the right exercise a day and 5 minutes of the right breath work and eat the right things and maybe pump a little sound therapy in, you can do a lot. It
It's fun.
doesn't, you don't have to be a triathlete. You don't have to go to CrossFit. I'm not saying if you choose that, don't do it. But, you know, the hacking, you know, the Ben Greenfields of the world and all those guys, I mean, you can hack your way to a lot. It's just you have to change things. And so from an investment banker's perspective, that's pushing the envelope for, you know, somebody like Goldman Sachs. You know, my best friend was the youngest analyst in the history of Goldman Sachs. I know what he did at Goldman. He's still there. But I also know how his back felt most of the time. You know what I mean? And it was in his 40s, and he was embarrassed to tell me. He told a friend, "You know, don't tell Sean, but I started doing yoga and I could stop taking my meds for my back." You know what I mean? Well, you idiot,
Yeah.
I told you that 20 years ago. You know what I mean? But at that time, you know, it wasn't cool to do yoga. That's what Fruit Loops did. You know what I mean? Now there's a yoga studio everywhere. So
Yeah.
I just really think it's an investment. And I think there's so many platforms. There's so much stuff online. I mean, I can go to Gaia. I can even Amazon Prime has they have, you know, Dragon Door stuff from back in the day, the guys that started the kettlebell revolution. I mean, they have stuff like that on there. I mean, you can find so much stuff online, good information, and just turn on your iPad that I'm talking to you guys on right now, and you have unlimited amounts of workouts and suggestions. I mean, Gaia's $7. You don't have $7.99 a month to learn about your health and how to make healthy things. I mean, there's so many websites. I mean, I think that technology and this internet revolution has created a revolution in fitness where if you like dance, if you like, because movement is critical to health. If you like dance, go get it into a dance class. You know, so I think there's so many varieties of things you can do out there that there's not an excuse anymore because there's unlimited amounts of information, and there's places on every street corner, and those people that will come to your house. If you're a businessman of money, you should have somebody that comes to your house and trains you and stretches you and manipulates your body and takes care of you. It's the best money that you'll ever spend because you'll be able to perform better.
I think people won't do it until they actually feel the benefits themselves, because when I got back from your farm and I started eating better and doing certain habits, yoga and some mindfulness, and there was a lot of other things that we did that helped me out, but I was thinking more creatively and working way less hours than I was in school. I was working very hard in school, and I don't think I came up with one good creative idea in 4 or 5 years. And then all of a sudden, in 3 weeks, working half the amount of time, I felt like I had accomplished way more than I did over 4 years, and I wasn't even working hard. So until people see that, you know.
Well, but part of that is you put yourself out of your comfort zone. I mean, me knowing you not for a long, long time, but enough from the, you know, we met a number of years ago when you were having back problems. You know, when I challenged you to do a podcast, I said, look, you're going to go meet incredible people. And every week you meet a different person that's pushing you and making you creatively think like, could I do that? How am I doing that? How could I examine that in my life? So I think part of performance and well-being is the mind. And mind is not just mindfulness, and mind is not just psychology. Mind is experience. Experience is one of the greatest teachers in the world, if not the greatest. So I'm a firm believer that, you know, you did something really brilliant, both of you having the courage to go out and do a podcast. You'd never done one. You didn't know what to do, but you did it. And, you know, all the people that you have on here are showing you a different angle and way of looking at life from a business and other perspectives. I really, you know, my hat's off to you guys from that perspective, because part of wellness and well-being is up here and making sure that you're expanding it and pushing it beyond your comfort zone on a continual basis, and allowing the creativity and the imagination to interface with your logical brain so you can make powerful, creative, you know, changing, you know, you guys want to change things. You don't want to be average. So by doing the things you're doing, I think anybody at any stage of their business career, by enhancing their experiences, will enhance their overall performance and their open-mindedness, because they'll hear things from other people. You know, business people are competitive. So the best thing is if some guy hears, oh, dude, I just raised 100 million. I didn't sleep, but I was intermittent fasting and doing breath work. I kicked butt, you know, I signed on the deal. I got 100 million in. What do you think that guy's going to do? The next week, he's going to be intermittent fasting. He's going to be finding somebody to do breath work. So business people are competitive just like athletes. So one of the great things that you can do in business is bring your lifestyle into it, because people are going to want what you have. So you can really create a revolution with you young guys of showing people, because you literally overcame things and you changed your lives for different reasons through lifestyle. And if you bring that as a young guy into the business world, people are going to have to compete with you. So in order to do that, it's like Tiger Woods. You know, golfers very rarely bench press. Well, Tiger had a huge bench press. Guess what? All of a sudden fitness became paramount in golf. So the guys that used to look sloppy all of a sudden were wearing very Euro style tight clothing, you know, and more buff. So that's an opportunity for you guys to bring a well-rounded, holistic approach to wellness and performance into the business world.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on. It's been amazing.
Yeah.